And it looks like we have everyone here to call the meeting to order.
Ben's not here yet.
Yeah, but Ben is not going to be here until later if he is, because he has a meet.
All right.
That's right.
Join us this early. So it's 5:45. I'm calling the meeting to order, and I'm going to start out with the roll call. Molly Krachowiak,
Here.
and Danielle Bailey,
Here.
Tamika Vukovic.
Here.
Okay, and Franklin is also here. Is there a motion to recess into executive session?
So moved. Danielle.
Is there a second?
I'll second. Oh, I'll give it to Tamika.
Okay. Well, then we are recessing into executive. Okay, we are just going to be waiting for at least one board member to return, and then we will be resuming our meeting.
I'm here.
And we have everyone here. So we are at motion item 1D, reconvening into open session. And we are convened in open session. So next item is 1E, approval of the agenda in compliance with section 1983 and 1984. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, on a voice vote, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Great. All right, then. Item 2A, new business, start of school updates. Oh, you're on mute.
Can't believe I just did that. Okay, so I just wanted to do a check-in. So this is day 6 of all students being in session. So with the holidays, you know, it seems like we're a little later into the year, but day 6, so the staggered start went really well. We got some feedback from some families on the staggered start. So when we start planning for next year, we'll obviously take that feedback into account. But I know that staff really appreciated the time, especially with COVID, to go over protocols, go over, you know, mitigation, go over procedures with the smaller groups of students to start the year. So that was successful. Everybody's settling into schedules, settling into routines. I would say that, you know, we're just starting to kind of get to that point where things are starting to settle a little bit with schedules and routines, because obviously it's day 6. STAR testing starts over the next couple weeks. So we'll get our benchmark data for this year around literacy and math. So both Parkway and Glen Hills will be having STAR testing over the next 2 weeks. And then of course, COVID. So dealing with COVID protocols, dealing with mitigation strategies, dealing with our first positive cases, working with our testing vendor. We think we have that ironed out. We're able to get that extra survey out to families. I was under the impression when I met with the vendor that they would have student names for screening. They didn't have access to that. So we had to do the additional survey. So tomorrow Parkway will have their first screening. Just wanted to reiterate and reassure families that if you did not sign up, you don't have, that is you opting out. So we are only pulling students for screening whose family signed up through the app, and then also through the extra step with the district to say, yes, I want my student to be part of screening. So families had the option to just do symptom testing or do both. So I just wanted to be really clear that if you did not fill anything out, your child will not be pulled, your child will not be tested. So that was, I just want to be clear about that so there weren't any concerns. I've been spending, another piece is I've been spending 2 mornings a week at Parkway, just trying to increase my accessibility with staff over there. just starting Tuesday and Thursday mornings in the building, working with Dr. Smith, Mr. Krager, just being accessible to staff over at Parkway. And that's been successful so far, I think. I'll check in with Dr. Smith and Dr. Krager in a couple weeks and see how much they like having me there. I think they like having me there. So it's nice just to be in that building as well. And then the last piece that I was going to update, or a couple more pieces, PTO, sports, extracurriculars are starting their events. We worked with Mr. Birmingham, we worked with PTO to make sure that when they're sending things out, it's clearly got the COVID protocols on there. It's got the mitigation strategies on there. So we just want to be really clear with families that we're following those safety protocols for any after school activities. And then the last piece is that we're continuing to work on communication, sending out family emails. And then I worked with Karen. She created a spot on the new website that's under about, and it just says district office communication. So if a family goes to that link, they can see any and every email that's been sent throughout the year, which we're hoping will be helpful if somebody missed something or wasn't set up in Infinite Campus or just wants to go back and find information from a previous email. They'll have access for that. It'll be archived on the website. And then also trying to use social media as well. So just wanted to give like I said, it's day 6, but just give a little update. I'm sure we'll have a lot more to share in October.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions?
A question, I hope, Allison. I think you mentioned that there'd be a COVID dashboard going up on the website.
Yes.
Are we going to continue to have regular reports around COVID though to the committee? I'm sorry, I can't remember which committee, but are we going to do regular reports about COVID, or is that dashboard and any, I don't know, emails going out about positive, like how are we going to continue to communicate about that?
I'm open to that. However you guys want it. The dashboard will be updated every week. And that is up on the website. So if you go under that COVID link, Karen added like the first button on the page is district dashboard. So every week on Fridays, we'll update those numbers. But I'm open to, I mean, obviously if there was, a big increase in cases or we had to send students virtual, you guys would know that, but obviously that could be an update as well. I mean, families would know, you guys would know, in the moment you're going to get that communication, but I'm open to however you want. If there was a standing item at a committee, I'm totally open to doing that. If that's something.
Or alternatively, I guess, so I'm a family who receives the letter that there were positive cases. Like if I want more information about, I know we can't give away some specifics, like how would I get more information about that? Would I reach out? Who would I reach out to?
Like as a family or as a board member?
As a family, no, I'm saying as a family, right?
I wasn't sure.
No, that's what I'm trying to figure out, what would people do if they want to understand what happened? Like, was the case, did it originate in the school? Did it come from outside? Do we know how many people are quarantining? Do we have access to that information as a family, a guardian or parent of a student, or no?
So a lot of that information is confidential. The quarantine information is part of the dashboard. So that is on there. How many students were quarantined during the week is on the dashboard. Something that's just a general that we've been talking about, because we've just, of course, hit our first couple cases, is when we would send a class virtual. And we've talked about if we hit that tipping point of more than half the kids. So if that doesn't happen, then obviously parents can be reassured that it's less than, way less than that are being quarantined. It is tricky because some of it is, you know what I mean? Like confidential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why those reports we were able to get some of the less confidential information out during some of those reports, but I'm not, we can talk about it more. I was just curious if that was the plan or not.
Yeah. If you could share with me, like what pieces of information you typically got, we could totally work that out. I just don't know what those looked like in the past.
The other question I have is, are you at least sending that generic letter, whatever generic letter, to the board when you're sending it out to the parents?
Yeah,
I don't remember seeing anything, and at least we don't have to actually, word for word, but at least something saying we have cases or we have people quarantined, just to let us know something. Because right now I feel like I'm really out of the loop, and somebody had mentioned it the other day and I'm like, I have no clue.
Yeah, Tamika, that's totally on me because in my previous district, the board members were included. So if I did Glen Hill staff all, they were on those emails. So I'm just used to you guys, you know what I mean? The idea that you're already on it. So I just have to remember to add you to those things. Because typically, if I send something out to parents that's really important like that, I'll send it to the staff as well and say this just went out to parents. So I just have to remember to put you guys on that too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's no other questions, then our next item is the consent agenda, items 3A to 3F. Is there a motion with respect to those items?
I would like to pull out, for clarification, item E.
Okay, is there a second for that motion?
It's not a
I'll
motion.
second. No,
it
it's not.
it doesn't have to be a motion. I just am pulling it out. So then the rest of the consent agenda can be approved without E.
We can discuss it regardless of the format. We can definitely discuss it separately. So, but then the question is, before we engage in discussion on that point, if we need to entertain a motion on approving the consent agenda.
You can, I make a motion to approve A, B, C, D, F of this consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 2E, 3E, I'm sorry. And I guess, you know, we could, if we could have just brief description of the borrowing, it does make sense to have a brief discussion on that. And Ms. Weiss, if you or Ms. Johnson wanted to explain what that is.
Sure, and I apologize that we put it on consent because we had talked about it last time a little bit. So I apologize to Mika for doing that. So go ahead, Lindsay.
In the past, the district has done short-term borrowing typically in the month of September. This is that same process. The only thing that's done differently is rather than me accepting the bids, I'm going through PMA. There's no additional cost, but they handle the bidding process for me. And this is just stating that you're giving permission for us to go to bid and we won't exceed X amount of money. And the dollar amount was configured as based off of what our cash flow was for the last 2 years.
Okay, that's what I thought it was, but it wasn't for sure. So I would just wanted to ask.
Sure.
Once we do that, we still have to approve the actual loan. Is that correct? Right.
Yep. So once we get the bid back and everything, I'll bring that back to the board for approval.
But this is something where we also have to, I think, jump through a couple of hoops just to provide notice and whatnot.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Is there a
I make
motion?
a motion to approve 3E.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and any further discussion? Seeing none on a voice vote, please signify by saying aye. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
carries. Wonderful. Okay, item 4. A board meeting format, virtual or in person.
Did we miss? I feel like we missed, do we miss F, bids for?
No, it was part of Tamika's motion.
Oh, sorry.
Consent.
Apologize. Sorry. Okay, so this is just open for discussion. I meant to include it on last month's meeting. I know that we had talked in the summer about bringing meetings back in person and then things got not great again. So I just wanted to bring it to the board. Really, it's obviously your discussion, your decision around how we want to have board meetings moving forward.
Okay,
Oh.
well, go ahead.
I give my opinion on this. I feel like we have kids in the school, but then, you know, we should be in person. But then I go to the point that most of the parents are actively participating in our virtual and are there, and like having this many people in a room, especially during COVID, may not be the best of things. So I've gone back to now feeling like we should stay virtual because we at least have a good participation with when it comes to our decision making in our virtual rather than people actually coming into the building. That's just, I went back and forth, but now I just kind of think we should stay virtual for a little while longer at least. That's my opinion.
Well, this is a discussion, so no decision needs to be made right now, and we would have to figure out the format. But I think for me, the issue is that we have to consider at the very least how we maintain exactly what Ms. Vukovic is discussing, which is, keeping people in attendance. One good thing that's come out of the pandemic is we've had high involvement with our meetings. We've had high attendance, and that's a good thing that I wouldn't want to lose. So I guess, some principles I'd want to go by on a return is that I would want to make sure that we still live cast it. If that means that, either you set up a single camera in a room, which I think is a little bit tougher, or everyone has a Chromebook and still appears virtually or not. I think that that's one thing you can do. I don't think that you necessarily mandate board attendance in person. But I am concerned about how we accommodate people and also how people can hear within the room. And to that extent, I think you need amplification of some kind. So I think that we should be working toward that. I think it was Ms. Krychowiak who told me very bluntly some time ago that if we're requiring our kids to be in the building, then we should not be exempting from that. And, I agree with that. I think that the issue is how do you accommodate, the number of people and also maintain the connection that we have. And I'll be frank, I've been very cautious about COVID, and I think it's very important to remain, careful. But I do think that we have to transition, and maybe the thing to do is just have a timeline. But whether we do it today or tomorrow, I certainly think within the next couple of months, we ought to have some return to in person.
And I guess I would say, I think various districts are doing it in different ways where you can limit the amount of people who can attend in person. You can only have certain board members attend in person. Like there are various ways to do it. So I would just echo that I want to make sure we maintain like a live streaming, virtual way for folks to participate. I think there's some equity in saying people have to be in the building, so we should be too. And I think the reason we want people in the buildings, primarily students, is for the benefits of in-person learning. So I would maybe look at what the benefits of having an in-person meeting are versus a virtual, to sort of assess whether we're doing it just to do it or whether it makes sense. I'd like to be in person because I think sometimes our dialogue gets to be a little bit more interactive, eventually, but I don't want to be in a room with 50 people if there's a really hot topic that people want to come talk about either, unless we can figure out how to do that the same way we ask our staff and students to do it, which is safe, socially distanced, masked, and making that work with a virtual option. So I think there's just some logistics to consider and that we should be working on putting some various options in place to consider those to really make a decision.
And I would just add that maybe the policy committee can put this on the agenda for their next meeting.
I can look in prior to that meeting too, just to talk to our tech support, since that's a big piece, just to make sure we could set it up well.
Well, and logistically, where would we meet? Would it be in the gym? And then how would that work? And things like that, not the gym, the auditorium or whatnot.
Yeah, I think a couple of us were still around when we stopped having in-person meetings, but I think we had one in-person meeting when COVID came before we went completely virtual. And it was very difficult because we were all, mind you, guidance changes, but we were each at a table, the table 6 feet away. There wasn't much room for visitors. And that was in the library. So it is a challenge. I don't think it'd be as challenging now as it was then. But I am sure we'll find a solution. And it sounds to me like there's interest in doing that. And I think that there are good reasons to be in person, at least which is not least, which is, we're representatives of the public, and we should be visible and we should be approachable. And I think that those are goals that frankly all of us long to attain as well, because we appreciate that interaction, not just with one another, but with the public as well. So.
I just want to say one more thing, and it was about the students, but by and large, we are asking every single staff member to be in close proximity with other students more than 23 every day. I mean, let's think about what that's like. And I don't think we are above that. And I've been, I am happy to insert myself in a conversation about how to plan that. We have the commons where we can, I just want everyone to know that there was a 4 school district meeting in the commons that I attended, as well as Miss Weiss and Miss Johnson was on there too. And we asked every teacher in our district to attend that. We are not above that. And I think it's really time for us to get on this wagon of being in person again. I think it sends a bad message to every staff member that we ask to participate in person every day, that we continue to sit on a computer. Added to that, that I also feel very disconnected with everyone I'm looking at on the screen right now. We do miss a lot of dialogue and rich conversation as a result of this. So I really would like to encourage us to move expeditiously with us getting back in person.
Here. Okay. If no one else has anything to add, I will move on to item 4B, which is ESSER 3 update.
I can jump in really quick with that. So as of right now, a lot of the districts around the state or around the country, we're waiting to get more clarification about what is eligible for the ESSER funding. The big piece is there a percentage of the ESSER funding that has to be addressed with learning loss? So as we're waiting to get more details about what is the parameters and what are the qualifications, we are putting together a survey. Part of the ESSER funding, we have to get input from all of the stakeholders, so the community, teachers, staff, everybody. So we're putting together a survey that will allow families to give a rating of what they would like to see as the priority of where the funding is spent, and then also just to be able to give input so that we can take all of those answers and put it together to come up with a plan of what we want to use the ESSER funding for.
Okay. Are there any questions? No? Okay, I'm going to move on then. Item 4C, employee engagement.
I'm going to do a quick screen share. So we met as an administrative team. I just wanted to give you guys a quick update on this. We've talked a lot about getting feedback from our employees, from our parents, and from our students. So we started with mapping out a timeline for employee feedback. If any of you have ever worked in a district that worked with Studer, you'll recognize a little bit of the practices. Ms. Young and I and a couple of the other administrators have all had experience with Studer, so we just took the pieces that we appreciated to implement this year. One of the things that we talked about was rounding, and rounding is just, it comes from like hospital rounding and the idea that you're checking in with people. So we're gonna have 2 types of rounding this year. One is just where you round with every staff member that you supervise, and you take about 15 to 20 minutes, which usually ends up to be about a half an hour, because you end up having some really good conversations. And you just start with asking them how you can support them, if they have the resources to do their job. And then we're going to work as an administrative team to come up with a couple more questions that are really geared towards some of the goals of each building this year, so that it makes sense to get that feedback from staff. And then the other piece of rounding is for new employees. So there are 2 check-ins for new employees. They're typically roughly 30-day and 90-day check-ins, but we pushed our timeline back a little bit because we have 2 new assistant principals, and they wanted to spend the first part of the year doing some really informal get to know each other meetings. So that's going to be September. And then we'll start with some of those new staff meetings. And really what you do is you meet with the new staff member. You kind of ask them. So you went through this interview process with us. We had these discussions and these interviews. You've now worked with us for a little bit. Are we what you expected? So it's just kind of like this frank conversation about, is the job what you thought it would be? When you went through this whole process with us, and really getting that feedback from them. The other kind of neat opportunity during those meetings is to talk to them about, because a lot of the staff come with prior experiences. So are there any processes or any procedures in our district that you've just looked at and went, wow, we did it like this, in my previous district, and that might work really well here. Like, do you have any recommendations or suggestions? Just to really validate the experience that some of our staff come to us with, and then we all come from different places with different ideas. So that's the beginning of the year. And then what we want to do is we want to make sure we're doing regular rounding with all staff. And what we did is we divided out kind of who we would round with. So for example, I would round with, Lindsay, I would round with Jenica, I would round with the building principals, the assistant principals, with Dr. Rodriguez, with some of the support staff. We talked about some of the staff that, like Denise and, social workers and counselors who have building roles, but then also work with me as a student services team, and it's just making sure we're doing that rounding. And then we really want to make sure we're checking in and looking at themes, because we would have, maybe mid-year as a leadership team, we'd sit down and we'd look at all our rounding notes. Well, prior to that, if something's glaring, and just look at some of those themes that are emerging, and what are some focuses that we want to make sure that we have as a leadership team for staff. So that's the rounding piece. And then the other piece is the survey. So we would have a staff survey that would go out in early December. And then the most important part of the survey is the after the survey. So what you do is you have a meeting with the staff and you roll it out and you talk about, here are the areas where you ranked us really well. Here are the areas where you said that we needed to grow. Can you provide us some feedback around those areas of growth? So that we know what, what could we do that you would rated us a 5, for example. So you get that feedback from staff after the survey, and then you create an action plan, which is why we wanted to do the survey. The team wanted to do the survey earlier in the year, so there'd be time to implement that action plan before going home for summer. So that would happen, survey action plan in early January, and then another survey at the end of the year to kind of check in again and how things are going. And guide the work for the beginning of the next school year. So this is just the employee piece. There will be something very similar to this with students. I know that Ms. Young does some student surveys already, and I've talked to some parents too around some student surveys that were done in the past. So we want to honor that work and kind of wrap that into how we move forward with student surveys, and then potentially student rounding, and then of course parent surveys as well. So we're working on the timeline for that, to get a parent survey out, and then it would be the same process. Once we get the parent survey results, we'd invite families in to give us feedback on those areas of growth, and then create that action plan and share it with all families so they know what we're focusing on to try to improve based on the survey results. So the 3 major groups. And so that's just wanted to give you an update on that. I've got the timeline for staff, but we're working on the other 2.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, thanks a lot for the hard work. I think it's a great plan that you put in place. Item 4D is Nicolay Partner Schools update.
So like I said, each month we meet. And so then at the end of our meeting, we just talk about things that we want to make sure we're all taking back and sharing with our board, so that there are no surprises. So that our board's in the loop on all the conversations that we're having. So a couple quick things that we talked about. ELA, as you know from talking to Jenica, is up for all 4 districts. Superintendents talked about aligning skills across districts, and what are the skills that students need to be successful K-12 and beyond. How can we monitor that? How can we assess that? So we kind of bumped ourselves into a teaching and learning meeting. So we're going to all join the teaching and learning team to see what their direction is for this year, how we can support that, and how we can be aligned across the districts. Already talked to Jenica about some of the focus that the team has talked about this year, and it really seems to be in line. So that's kind of exciting. Update on COVID testing. I know I talked about it earlier, but just to let you know that all 4 districts are participating in the testing program. 3 of us have the same vendor. 1 for some reason doesn't, but 3 of us do have the same vendor. We've all started testing, and we're just really checking in with each other on how things are going and keeping each other in the loop on that. So it's nice that we all are in the same process. And then not too exciting, but we identified the superintendent that will be the snow emergency person this year.
Oh, who is
Doesn't
it?
doesn't get to be me this year. It's Dr. DeLutri this year. Although I do appreciate that on our agenda, it said Snow King, and they changed that to say Snow King / Queen. So I appreciate the change made to the agenda by the area soups. So, and then we just talked a little bit about, and this will have to be a discussion that we have moving forward. I was going to probably put it on one of our committee meetings about, I know some districts do virtual when there's snow. Some districts are really like, no, kids are kids. We need to have snow days. Do you do virtual if it's a storm that you know is coming? Like some of those ideas around like, do you use that as an option for snow days or not? So that's just a conversation that they're having. Nobody's really made a solid decision. So I was thinking that could come to a committee meeting and we could start talking about it.
Didn't we, I'm sorry, I thought we did talk about this last year with Dr.
Maybe.
Moser. I don't know if we actually, I believe that well, I'll have to go back, but that's something to figure out, is that we had this conversation when we were remote, maybe perhaps, I think, or for the hybrid. So look back at that history just
Okay.
to see what we've talked about. Can I ask about the COVID-19 testing? So are we like tracking as a district the data of the testing, or is the vendor tracking that? Like what's being done with that information?
So what happens is we created an internal document this week. Just if there's a positive case, here are the steps. So then our district nurse, who's amazing, has that. And so what we did is part of that document is if the vendor has a positive test, that they would immediately contact either Ms. Hess or myself if they can't find Ms. Hess. And then Ms. Hess would go through the normal procedure of notifying me, notifying building administrators, doing contact tracing. So really, they just hand it off to the school nurse.
I guess I mean, of all the kids being tested, because this is regular testing, are we tracking like this many people are being tested, all negative, like that kind of information too, not just the.
So if
positive
we
piece of-
are, but it's kind of in two different spots. So tomorrow's our first screening. So we've got a list of all the kids whose family said, yes, you can screen my kid. So we would have those numbers. I think it's about 40 for Parkway students that parents opted to have them screened in the weekly screenings. Of course, that can always change because that link is open and I get notifications if a parent signs up on the document so we can add their kid to the list. So that could always change. So then I would be able to tell after tomorrow, you know what I mean? Of those 40, we
Okay.
would know by the end
Okay.
of the day because it's the 15-minute rapid test.
Okay,
If any of those were positive.
okay,
And then Kim would track that because we have a district-wide tracking document where we're
Okay.
tracking any cases of close contact. We have tabs for symptoms. I mean, we're keeping track of just about everything. So if any of those they would go on that doc.
okay, cool, thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions? Just to make sure. Okay, seeing none, we are moving on to item 5A, which is visitor participation. I want to thank you for your indulgence in waiting for us to start a little bit later this evening. But we're finally at visitor participation. So visitors may speak upon any non-agenda item at this time. State law and or board policy may limit school board response. We will ask that each person keep his or her comments to a total of 2 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to say anything? If so, please virtually raise your hand in the chat and we'll give everyone a few moments to raise their hand. Okay. All right. As we start to see some names filter in, I will call on the first name. Please state your name and your address. Ms. Niggy.
Oh, this is Lisa Kennedy, 2140 West Skyline Road, Glendale, Wisconsin. My question is regarding open positions in the district. There seem to be a number of resignations that happened over the summer and some even were approved at the last board meeting in August. So I'm just looking for kind of what positions are currently open within the district, how is that going with open positions? What recruiting is happening? Kind of where we stand with some of those positions that are being open, that are open.
Okay. Ms. Weiss, do you have anything you can offer at the time?
That's a tough question to answer. So there's active recruiting all the time. There's a major staff shortage in the state. And that's something that we realized even in hiring over the summer, as we tried to hire staff and as we went through interview processes, and we weren't getting the number of candidates that we typically get. Right now, I believe we have the majority of our positions are filled. We do have multiple pregnancies, which is just throwing a monkey wrench into things. So we're working on long-term subs and things like that. Lindsay, you could probably chime in. I feel like we've got the majority of things filled at this point.
Yeah, we do. We have a couple positions that we're always going to be looking for. I know we recently hired for some lunch and recess supervisors, and it's an ongoing process, especially when we have new students enrolling in the district all the time, and just figuring out where the staffing need is. But I would echo Ms. Weiss's statement that it has definitely been a tough, challenging summer. Some positions, it's just been very limited number of applicants, and it's really competitive out there. And so, just trying to make sure we can maintain staff and keep them long-term. So it's definitely an ongoing process for sure.
And I could add a little bit to when I met with the area superintendents, we actually talked about the challenges that all the districts had this summer with staffing. And we talked a little bit about communication that we could have with each other, especially when you get to like August around staffing, because we want to make sure that we're not trying to compete with each other when it comes to staffing within our collaborative, but it really is tough because there's a teacher shortage.
Okay, thank you. Next hand up is Mr. Rodriguez.
Hi, this is Justin Rodriguez, and I live at 5742 North Sunset Lane in Glendale. And I had heard earlier in the meeting some information about federal money that may be available to offset learning loss. And then I heard some discussion also about the COVID protocols. My question is, for students that have one or potentially more than one quarantine period throughout the school year, what efforts are being done to address their learning loss that could occur during that time?
So I would say it's really individualized and it depends on the grade level. For example, what we would do for 5K as far as, teachers getting work together and things, is going to look really different than like some of the older kids that have the technology to log into Google Classroom and communicate that way and do the classwork that way. So I know that's not like probably, super specific answer. It's also one of those things where we just have to be flexible and be willing to bob and weave and change plans if we get to a space where we have lots of kids quarantining, because then the plan would need to change, based on where we go with the pandemic. But right now it's asynchronous learning. Part of our internal communication process is, once we've identified any close contacts, then the principal reaches out to the classroom teacher, who then reaches out to the family to set up that learning plan for the time that they would be out.
Okay, great. One of my children, who's in 4th grade, is going to be quarantined for a while, and I just want to make sure that he has the resources available. And I'm happy to hear that he'll be getting contacted by the teacher and doing the asynchronous learning through the Google Classroom. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, the next person we have on the list is Jenny Doss. Welcome.
Hi, Jenny Doss, 6605 North Rayburn Lane. I am a little confused about the special education caseloads, especially in regards to the special education audit that was done last year. So especially with 8th grade, where 2 special ed teachers and 3 paras were suggested, 2 full-time special ed teachers. And then for 7th grade, it was 1 full-time teacher and then 2.5 to 3 paras. And I know that we're having a para shortage, but with 19 students last year in 8th grade, I'm concerned that the solution is that we have the 7th grade teacher sharing the caseload with 8th grade.
I'm sorry, what was the specific question? It was just how we're managing the caseloads?
Well, I'm concerned. Well, one, I'm curious why we're not following the recommendation, and 2, I'm concerned at how big the caseload is, especially with relation to how big the caseload is and the types of students in the caseload.
Okay, so I'll start with the audit. There are lots of recommendations in the audit, so we recognize that we couldn't, have an audit that I pretty much had my hands in July and then implement a bunch of changes in September. We have IEPs that are already written certain ways, and obviously we have families who have come to count on the way that we provide services for students. So we couldn't just rip that Band-Aid off and make a bunch of changes. We are working through the audit as far as the 7th and 8th grade. What we did is we have 2 special ed teachers servicing 7th and 8th grade, but as content specialists, which actually is going to provide a lot more consistency for them because they're meeting with the teams. So one is supporting literacy and one is supporting math. So that's how we evened out those caseloads and those particular grade levels. There are other grade levels where caseloads still aren't necessarily equitable, and that's work moving forward for sure. But right now, the way the district has it set up is they have 1 special ed teacher per grade level. So that wasn't something that I could just come in and change in the middle of the summer. Like, that's something that we have to look at. Like you said, it's not even necessarily about the numbers, right? You got to look at the number of kids, but then you have to look at their needs. You have to look at the severity of the needs on the caseloads. You could have 4 kids and it's a heavier caseload than 8. So you really have to look at individual IEPs. And so it's a lot of work that has to be done. And then going through the IEP review process, if you're changing case managers and all of that. So I want you to know that we definitely hear you and that we're working through the audit. We've actually, the board approved a consultant to come in and she's going to start working next week, meeting with building principals, meeting with teachers, going into classrooms to really dig deeper than the audit even did and give us a real current state of how things look in special education right now. But we just didn't feel like we could make huge changes, so close to the beginning of the school year starting. So it's going to be work that's done throughout the entire school year.
So, but the changes that are happening is giving less support, not more support than what was happening last year.
No, all students will have, we have IEP is a legal document. If they have a certain amount of support for literacy, math, or anything in between, we still have to provide that.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Doss. I don't see any other hands up. So if anyone else has anything to add, in the interim, I just want to make 2 quick comments to take my president hat off for a moment. The first is the foundation has a run walk on September 24th in the evening. So if you haven't signed up, sign up. It's always a really good time and it's a terrific fundraiser for the school. The other thing I want to give a shout out to our coaching staff across country. I guess that there was, and I know at the beginning of the year, and there's also bus shortage. There were some issues with getting to a meet today, and I guess that our coaching staff turned that lemon into lemonade and ended up having a Glendale specific meet. Because we couldn't get to the location. So I think it was a great idea, great way to keep people engaged. And I'm glad that, we have finally returned to competitive sports at school and people who are committed to, dealing with any inconvenience along the way. So I want to say thanks to coaching staff and to Glen Hills for making something happen today, even when busing fell through a little bit. And I still don't see any other hands up, so I'm going to close out visitor participation. And our last item on the agenda today is a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, on a voice vote, please signify by saying aye. All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. We'll see you at the next regular board meeting, and also keep your eyes open for those committee agendas as well.
All right. Good night, everybody.